They are not here this evening, but we want to thank Cindy and Jay Warren Klein, who sponsored tonight's program. They did it in honor of our author, Donnie's dad, Jay Weiss. That came out of many, many, many conversations before shul, after shul, during shul. Jay probably heard most of the entire book over the course of these conversations, and he really liked it. So we thank the Warren Kleins for sponsoring tonight's program. You can read the biography of Jay Weiss in the back of the book, and you would find out that he has a law degree from Boston University. He's a business owner. He's a creative person, formerly based out of Pennsylvania, now based partially in Pennsylvania, but also in Florida and in Israel. And also, none of that has anything to do with the fact that he wrote this book, pretty much. So the entire biography is kind of extraneous, but it's a book that has been in the works for a very long time. If you've known my father-in-law, you've heard parts of this book for the last 10 years in any conversation you've had with him, because he was working on a part, or there was some dialogue, or there was like a story in the book that he just worked out that he was talking about. And so, this has really been a work in progress for the entire family and the wider, Jewish communities that he's associated with for a very, very long period of time. And we're all very happy that the book is out as a finished product, and hopefully you'll like it also. So I'm going to throw it over to Jay, and he'll introduce the book, and he'll begin with just a short reading to give you a flavor of what's going on. In his own words, in the book's own words. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jay Weiss.
Okay, what I first want to do is just explain that this here is just to give you a little idea if I'm reading something or we're talking about...
Can you use the mic?
Use the mic. No problem at all. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's on.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Not any better. How about this?
Better.
That's a lot better. Okay. Okay, good. I did this so that if I'm reading something and you say, I'm trying to remember who that person is, they're basically just really 6 people for what we're gonna. There are more, but for talking about what we're going to talk about, you have Paul Hamilton, who is. I'll tell you in a moment who he is. That's their age, so you have some idea who we're talking about. And he's also Rob Martin, because he went there under the name of Rob Martin, okay, when he went to the lake. And then you have Mrs. Diamond, Rena Diamond, and she has 4 children. Her son Kobe is 12 years old, Mimi is 10 years old, and then 2 twins, Miri and Avi, who are 6 years old. Okay? So in case I mention Mimi, you're going to say, who's that? So you can just catch it right there. Okay. Let me give you a little bit of background so that just in a moment or so you have an idea what this is about. The first person we're going to talk about is Paul Hamilton. He's from Liverpool, and that may ring a bell for you, some of you who are my age. Liverpool, England. He was one of the lead singers in the British rock and roll band that took the world by storm for maybe 6-7 years. And the group broke up, and when the group broke up, he went out on his own, as the others did as well, and he became really the most popular and the most popular solo performer in the world. He goes under the name of Rob Martin to a summer community at a lake in Pennsylvania, populated solely by very religious Orthodox Jews who don't watch TV, nor do they listen to pop music on the radio. Why does that matter? Because he got sick, and he's been losing weight and fainting, and the doctor says, you're fine, but you can't work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. You need a rest. Well, if you look like him, if you have that face, Paul Hamilton, where do you go? Can you come here? No. Can you go to the beach here? No. He'd get recognized in about 8 seconds. And everybody go up and ask him for an autograph, or if they could take a picture with him. So where does he go? So his accountant says, I know where to go. My baby sister became really religious, and she lives at this lake in the summer. It's all Orthodox Jews, and they don't watch TV. They're not going to know who you are, and they're not even going to care who you are. So off he goes as Rob Martin, an accountant. That's what he goes as. Rita Diamond and her family also go in the summer to that lake community. One day, her 12-year-old, Kobe, goes swimming out in the lake, and he catches his leg on a pole that's left in the lake, and he tears his leg up pretty badly, and he can't swim, he can't control his leg, he can't tread water. He's yelling, "Help, somebody help me." So Paul happens to be at the lake, or Rob, as they know him, jumps in the water, dives out, saves him, brings him in, takes him to the urgent care place. And his mother is so grateful. She says, I really have to thank you. She invites him Friday night to come over for dinner, as well as to thank him, but she wants her children, her other 3 children, to stand up and have something to say to this man and thank him. To learn that when somebody does something special, you have to thank them. So that's what happens. And where I'm going to pick up is, he goes there the first night, Friday night, and he finds out that she's kind of had a tough life. Her father was killed by a drunk driver when she was 12 years old, and that really, her mother lost it and never got it back. And that's, we all have difficulties, and that was Rita's. So the next day he goes over and basically he brings something for the kids to play, because he knows that Kobe can't go outside and run and play because he's got bandage all up his leg. They don't have a TV, and Rena told him that they're not allowed to use cell phones on Saturday. So now what's the kid going to do? So he grabs some Monopoly games and another game, and goes over and plays with the kids. And so she really thanks him. She says, he's Catholic. She says, I know you could have gone anywhere. You didn't have to be, wrapped up in the house playing games with kids. I really want to thank you. So she invites him to their ice cream party they had Saturday night. And, okay, I'm going to pick up here. The kids have just are going to sleep. And let me see where I was going to start. Okay, so they go upstairs to sleep, and she brings out, and I'm going to read from this. Rena brought out in 2 cups of tea to the dining room table, and they sat there sipping their tea. So he said, Rena, how long have you been coming out here to the lake? She says, right after Kobe was born, we decided we wanted a place away from the hustle and bustle of the city where Kobe could see grass, play on it, and ride his bike without me being scared to death of him getting out in traffic and getting hurt. So tell me, now Paul has seen the picture of her in the family, her husband. Most of these places, the husbands stay in New York where they work during the week, and they come out on the weekends, probably like here too, I would think to some degree, maybe in West Hampton Beach. The husbands are working, and they come out in the summertime. Sometimes every weekend, sometimes every other weekend. And he's seen these pictures, so he knows that. He says, so tell me, when does your husband come out to the lake? He must miss you and the kids like crazy over the summer. Rob, my husband died 6 years ago. Paul nearly choked on his tea. What? He said, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I had no idea, he stammered. I'm so sorry. She says, that's okay. Nobody feels so foolish. I mean, my God, I saw the picture of the 2 of you in the dining room, and I just assumed he was home, coming up after the weekend or whatever. Nobody ever said anything, and I had no idea. I'm sorry, really, I am. She says, look, you didn't know. I get that. The kids don't talk about it. And I generally don't say to people I meet, how do you do? My name is Rita Diamond. And by the way, I'm a widow. I understand. You don't need to apologize. Really, you don't. So, how long ago did you say he died? Just about 6 years ago. A few months before the twins were born. They were born after he died? Yeah. I was about 7 months pregnant when he died. Actually, Avi is named for him. His name was Avraham, or Abraham in English. And that's Avi's full name, named after him. I see. Tell me about him. What did he do? Well, he and a close friend of his, Carl Friedman, started a mutual fund that they managed together. They did very well, thank God. He loved his work and was very good at it. So what happened? Well, right after I got pregnant with the twins, he started getting pains in his stomach. Not the regular kind, he said. The kind of pain that he said would go right through him. He also felt weak and was losing weight. He went to the doctor, and they said it was probably indigestion or stomach virus. He went back to the doctor again after 2 more weeks because the pain was just constant, and it clearly wasn't a virus. They sent him for a CAT scan and found a large tumor on the pancreas. And I remember they did various blood tests, and it was cancer. And at that point, they said it had already spread to the lungs, and it was what they called stage 4. They tried chemotherapy, but there was just no result. He died about 4 months later, just about 2 months before the twins were born. Oh God, he said, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you bring back painful memories again after last night when she was talking about her father. Paul lowered his head and put his hand to his forehead. He shook his head a bit from side to side and said, I don't know how you managed to go from day to day. Well, when you have 4 kids, at that time, Kobe was 6 and Mimi was 4, so I guess you could say I had my hands full, she said with a small smile. Paul sat there quietly, momentarily speechless, but his mind was racing. He said, how does a person handle so much loss, so much tragedy in one lifetime? How do you hang on to your sanity? And you're all alone. Thank God for the kids. Thank God they seem to be such good kids. And of course, that makes the accident with Kobe even more frightening for her. I was just thankful I was in the right place at the right time. Finally, he said, look, I deal with some very top-notch accountants. I may be good, but these guys are the real thing. If you ever want help with your finances or someone that could look over what you're doing and give you his opinion or advice, I know they'd be happy to help. You don't have to tell me now. At any point, if you feel that you'd like to talk to a professional in that area, just let me know and I'll set it up for you. Thank you. Rena sat there not saying anything, just looking at Rob and thankful once again that God had sent him her way. First, the business with Kobe, and now, just a person she could talk to, and an honest person she believed she could trust. After Avraham died, his parents had stayed in close touch, and they're still very close. But, Rena thought, it's certainly different talking to a person more my age, and even though he's not Jewish, and he knows relatively little or nothing about the way we live, he seems to be such a pleasant person, such a nice person. And that's your introduction to Rena. Rena is a very strong-willed, very confident young lady. At one point, someone asks her, she said, well, you know, how did you do with this? She says, well, you have to understand, when my father died, my mother lost it. You know, everything was dark, everything was bad, everything was just our bad luck, and everything was terrible. And the light just went out of her eyes. She used to tell me funny stories about the family, and never did after my father died. And I always believed that, you know, that she basically died when he died. It's just that God took an extra 9 years to finish the job. And that's how I felt. And she says, so when my husband died, I was determined that I would never, ever do that with my kids. And I knew that my kids would do whatever I showed them. If I showed them unhappiness, if I showed them that the world was out there all against me, everything was terrible, then that's what they would be. And if I laughed and I played with them and I showed them the happy side of life, then that's what they'd be. And I was determined that they would know that I was heartbroken, but they would never see me broken. Never. And they never did. And that's why I said, that's why you see the kind of kids that you see. Happy, smiling all the time. And that's what was my job to do that with her.
Is she based on anybody in real life? Or it's just like a character that kind of came to you?
Well, that's funny. Who was she based on? Let's put it this way. Paul Hamilton was easy to base on. I think you all know who Paul Hamilton is, right? There aren't too many people from Liverpool, England, who were with the most famous band in the entire world for 7 years, other than somebody named McCartney, you know, and basically that him and the way that he was forced to live. I mean, here he is, not happy about having to go to this lake in Pennsylvania until he found out how wonderful it was. But, you know, like, why do I have to do this? Why? Because there's not a place on earth that you can go to that they won't recognize you. So that was Paul. Rena was harder. And this is how I found the person for Rena. You understand what and who she is. She's a woman who is very strong, with some very tough things in her life, losing her father at an early age, at 12, and then losing her husband and having to come home with 2 babies and raise the family alone. I get a haircut at this place, and there's a young lady who's been cutting my hair for about 40 years, and sometimes she gets a little late and I have to wait a little while. And there's a table right there next to the chair that I wait at, and she has all these magazines, movie magazines and stuff like that. So, I don't usually read those things, but I'm sitting there, I have nothing better to do, so I pull it out and look at it. And I see the story of this actress, what's her first name? Jennifer Garner. And she has 3 or 4 children, and she's divorced, and she's raising these kids herself and really putting in the time. She doesn't take a lot of work, a lot of acting work, and she's committed to raising those kids and doing the right thing with them. And she's also quite beautiful. And I thought, that's the one. That's the one that when Paul would say something about, I'm lucky I'm getting to know you, she says, yeah, you're right, you are. She's very strong and very secure in who she is. And so that's who I have interacted.
In general, so it's very clear that the point of the story is kind of like this meeting of opposites, or at least people from very different walks of life. There's the celebrity who's anonymous. There's the Jewish woman who doesn't really know who she's dealing with, and they're trying to feel out what was, you just read, the beginning of a relationship. So I'm wondering, I think I know the answer, but they don't, which is, when you were conceiving the idea for this story, did you start just with that interesting idea and kind of work your way forward, kind of let the story take you where it was going? Or was there a particular story in mind that you were trying to tell, like a narrative arc, so you kind of knew how it was going to go even before you started?
That's a really good question, and I'd have to think about that for a minute. This is how the book got written. About 12 years ago, I wrote the first chapter, which you've pretty much heard so far. There was just a meeting of his boys, and they told him, look, you're fainting and you're losing weight, you gotta go to the doctor. And the doctor basically says, you're fine, you don't have anything wrong, but you need 6 weeks of rest because you can't do what you do. You can't work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. These things aren't created for that. So, that first chapter I wrote, and then I wrote the last chapter. So I wrote the very end of the book, I wrote the beginning of the book, and then I just went save on the computer, and I put it in a folder, and I put it away, because I was working pretty much all day and a lot of after hours work that I had to do, and I really had no time to do with anything. And I thought, this is interesting. I don't know how I came up with that, but this is kind of interesting. One day, when I have time, I'll play with that. Well, one day came when this little thing, COVID came along, COVID, and our work pretty much dramatically slowed down to a degree that somewhat stopped for a period of time.
Your editors know he's in the travel business.
We used to take churches and synagogues and all sorts of places to Israel and to Greece, to Turkey, all over. And then it all stopped when COVID came. Everything was closed. So I pulled that thing out one day and I said, what? This looks interesting. I know the beginning and I know the basic issue. She explains to him at one point, early in the story, she's having a hell of a day. She really is. She's got 4 kids, and she says something about that they're driving her crazy, and he says, kids are like that. She says, I know, but when they all pick the same day to be like that is when I go nuts. And he says, you ever think of getting remarried? I mean, you could use another pair of hands with this crowd, the 4 of them. She says, yeah. She says, I'm going to, I've used a matchmaker, but hasn't really gone anywhere. And also, for us, religious Jewish women, it's tough. Because, for example, I don't shake hands with men, other than my husband. and it means, of course, I won't kiss them or hug them, you know. So it's a little difficult, but you know what? It'll be what it'll be. It'll get better. I just keep thinking one day it'll get better. And so, you know, when you have all those little things there, you have the most famous man in the entire world. And the first night he comes out of there, though, he walks back to his cottage, and he's seen the picture of her husband, who he assumes is still alive. And he says, God, how I envy him. He's got a gorgeous family. Those kids are just wonderful. Beautiful, beautiful kids. So delicious. We sit at the table, and all they're doing is talking and everything. Of course, they can't use their cell phones on Friday night, so nobody's sitting there like this. They're all in the midst of a conversation. He's got a beautiful, gorgeous wife. He's got a beautiful family that I will never have. And how I envy that guy. How I envy him. I'm 38 years old. I'm never going to have that.
So I think we're getting the sense that the characters in the book are like very, very well fleshed out. They have like very deep personalities. Right? There's a lot of nuance in the dialogue as they go back and forth. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit to just the experience of getting to know these characters as you were writing the book. Like, did you have like a really good sense of who each one was going to be before you went from point A to point B? Or like as you got to know them more over the course of writing, did they surprise you in some way? Did you surprise yourself? What's the experience with working with characters like that in a novel?
I really think that from the beginning, I knew who each of them was. I knew Paul. I knew exactly, you know, and the benefit, I mean, to be honest, I should tell you, there are 3 more books. This is book 1. There are a total of 4. But at one point in one of the books, it's not in this version, but a woman he's talking to, at this point, she knows that this other woman knows who he is, and he's there staying for something, and she says, "Are you going to go to this thing?" He says, "No, I really don't think I can. I think there's a small crowd, and I can't really function well in a small crowd. In a big crowd, when there's 250 people, you know, I can easily get lost, and it works much better." You know, so she looks at him, she says, "Paul, is it always like this?" And he goes, "No, but often, most of the time." She says, "It's just, you know, is it really? This is a hell of a price you pay. You lose basically, you know, your freedom. It's a terrific price to pay just for the money." He says, "Nobody does it for the money. I mean, at some point when you're starting off, yes. But at this point, no. You do it because you love it. You absolutely love performing. You love getting up in front of an audience. And when that audience is there with you, it's like there's nothing better than that. And that's what you do it for." So I kind of understood. And that's why I had to use the name Paul from Liverpool, because all of us understand what it must be like. You know, we look at the great side, yes. You've got $1 billion in the bank. That's very nice. But, you know, it's, in a lot of ways, you can't go to a baseball game. You just can't. Unless you see somebody's box. You can't go. So you can't go to the movies. Well, he has his ways of going, you know, but it's you know. And for Rena, I really, there were people that I could try and put into certain people. So like, for example, Rena's mother-in-law and father-in-law, who were her husband's parents. You know, they're still very close, and they're in the story. I know who each of them is, and her mother-in-law is just one of these sweet, wonderful women who, even though her son is gone, all she does is pray every day that Rena finds somebody to marry, which is not a common thing, but she loves her. And Rena even says, she says, you know, they treated me like their daughter from day one, and all she hopes is someday she'll find somebody and get married, or help her with the kids and give her her life back, which is a rare thing, a very rare thing. And so I had people that I knew that I could say, that's who that is, and that helped me with her, what she would say. That helped me, so when she says something, she says, well, I don't want to get into anything that can lead you to know something that I don't want you to know at this point. Because the real issue is, the end of the book, until you get to the end, you're kind of waiting. Is that, I'll tell you this, that the young lady who was my editor is originally from the United States and a Yale graduate, but she moved to Israel about 20 years ago, and she got recommended to me tremendously by the young lady who drew this for she didn't draw this, but she put the cover together. She's done about 200 book covers in Israel, and she said to me, if you want the best editor, this is who it is. I work with them all. Call her or contact her. This is her information. So she sent me a note. She said, send me 4 pages of the story, or you can send the whole thing. If it's easier for you, just hit click and send the whole thing, and I'll pick out 4 pages to read. And I think what she was saying is, I want to see if you've never written anything. If it's no good, I don't want to get started on this. So I just want to see it. So I sent her the whole file because it was easier to do. And I just sent the thing, click off, it went. So about a week later, I get an email from her. She says, I have to tell you that in 21 years of doing this, and countless hundreds of books that I've done, this is the first time I ever read a manuscript cover to cover when I didn't have a contract signed to do the job. But I had to find out how it ended. I just had to find out how it ended. And
that means basically, if you read it first, don't tell anybody else how it ends.
Yeah, I would ask you very much, don't do that, because you're going to hurt the person who has the opportunity to really think it through. So that, I was just talking with Nicole earlier, and I was saying that, when you're 10 pages from the end, I would love to come back and give you all pencils and say, okay, write the end. Write the end. And I bet I'll get 3 or maybe 4 endings to the story, because you know those people so well. You understand who Rena is. And Paul, he's a sweet guy. I mean, he's the nicest guy. When she tells somebody, how, he's the nicest guy I've ever known. He really is. He's special, and of course, if you think about it for a moment, here's a lady who won't shake hands with Paul, or with anybody, Jewish or not Jewish, other than her husband. She doesn't shake hands with men, and she's looking at a fellow who's Catholic. She knows he's Catholic. And that's going to bring all sorts of feelings in her head that allow you to really go through, here's a person who's looking, she's 37 years old. How many more times is she going to bump into somebody who not only does she sort of like, and maybe he likes her, but he's crazy about those kids. And those kids are crazy about him. When he goes there, the kids will jump on his lap and tell him what's going on, and he'll say, well, what did you do? What did you do this week, Miri, little, the 6-year-old girl? And Avi, were you outside playing? I didn't see you. Oh yeah, they love him. And she always said, I never had what's the word, the chutzpah, what's the word chutzpah in English? I never had the audacity to ask God to send me someone who would love my children, and they would love him. I just hoped they would get along, and he would be willing to come into the house and help raise them. But would I ever ask God to send me somebody who would be in love with my kids? No, I would never have the nerve to ask for that. And here, it's like,
Here's a question we didn't go over before. Okay, so it's a little bit of a cold call. A lot of times when novelists are writing a story, they're really writing about something else. There's like an issue they want to grapple with, or there's some larger topic they want to address. And the story in the novel is a way of them talking about that other thing, but doing it like through narrative, right? Sometimes a story is just a story. Is there like a point that you're trying to make in this book, or like a central question that you're trying to answer, or is it just a story that popped into your head?
That's gonna have to wait till we talk after you've read the book. The answer is yes, but I really don't, I don't want to say anything that would tip you off as to where this will go at the end, because it's not fair to you. Believe me, it's not. And if you read it and you're giving it to your husband or your wife or your son or your daughter, don't tell them anything. Just read it, and they'll be happy that you did that, because just like this gal who's done over 300-400 books that she's edited, she said, I read it cover to cover because I had to find out how it ended. And don't take that away from somebody. And that's why I'm very careful whenever I do this, not to give you any inkling of, I can tell you where it's going, but I'm not going to tell you where it went.
So one more question for me, and then we'll do like one more short reading, and then we'll break for Q&A or maybe some dessert and book signings. The last question is, now the book has been out for several months, and I've done a few of these readings, and people have read copies of the book, right? People that you know, but also people that you don't know, who have also gotten back and been contacting you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're, as a published author, now that you're getting responses to your book, was there anything that people have told you about their reaction to reading it that's really stuck with you, or surprised you, or made you feel like especially gratified, that anything like that?
That I can say. I knew that it was really a good book. I could just tell. I mean, I could read it 4 times and I still, I laugh at the same things, and some of the silly things that some do. But I knew what it was. What I never expected were the comments that I got. A girl I went to high school with, and I haven't seen I don't want to tell you how many years, but it was a long time that I graduated high school. And she called me, she said, I just had to tell you, it was like this beautiful, beautiful book. And I can't, somebody whose name you mentioned, but he said, he said, of all the things I've read, the dialogue between Rob, Paul, and Rena, and the dialogue between Rob and those kids was the most beautiful I've ever read, in all the things I've ever read. And I was really, a lot of wonderful, wonderful comments that shocked me, because I didn't expect that. I expected they would say they really loved it and smiled. But I get 2 things. That they absolutely, totally loved it, and where's book 2? Where is book 2? That's what everybody says.
So there's some pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. So to finish off now, so maybe you'll read one more short section. So why don't you set that up, and we'll conclude that way.
Okay. This is the last Friday night. He's leaving Sunday. He's been there just about every Friday night because she has cousins who want to come and see him and thank him for saving their cousin and see how Kobe's doing and everything. So, he's been there quite a lot on Friday nights. And so this is his last one before he's leaving. And nobody's talking. Nobody's talking. They're all trying to get his attention or do this. And for the first time, there's quiet at the table. And so Rena's trying to get something talking going, but so she says, so Rob, how's the packing going? And at that point, Mimi, the 10-year-old girl, who from day one just fell in love with him. It was like the 2 of them were crazy about each other. And so Mimi, who at 10 was a good bit more sensitive than Kobe, and more tuned in than the twins, broke into tears and ran away from the table. Paul felt there wasn't much he could do, and Rena went upstairs to see what was going on. And there was Mimi crying into her pillow. And she came in, she sat down next to her, and Mimi looked up and said, it's not fair. It's just not fair. I know, honey, I know. Why does he have to leave? It's not fair. Why can't he stay? Doesn't he like us? Why is he going? And she buried her head in Rena's lap. There aren't very many good answers to make a 10-year-old feel better about losing someone she's gotten so very attached to. It's a helpless feeling to see your child hurting like that, knowing there's not a lot you can do. Maybe if we all ask him to stay, he will. Do you think so, Ema? Rena looked at Mimi and so badly wished she had a wand to make it all go away, but no. She said, Mimi, do you want to go back downstairs and finish dinner? You'll have a little more time with Rob. I don't know. So I says, well, I'm going to go back downstairs, try and come back down. So she goes back down and she says, well, welcome to the world of young children. And Paul wasn't sure it was an awkward exchange for her to listen to. What he couldn't know was that Rena was realizing how much the kids missed having a father in their house. For as much as one parent can do, there's just something about having both of them in your life. And that's the way it was supposed to be. That's how it should have been. Just one more of those painfully bad spins of the wheel of life. The wheel of her life. For all you do, for all you try, there's still something missing. So Paul said, do you want me to go up and talk to her? I don't know if it'll help, but I guess I can't make it worse, whatever you like. So he goes upstairs and he knocks on the half-open door, and Nimi was buried in the pillow, crying softly. He says, can I come in, Nimi? Nimi just nodded her head. When Paul came in and sat down next to her, she turned around and put her head in his lap, crying. Paul thought, oh, this is 100 times harder than any negotiation I've ever been in, and I've been doing that for almost 20 years. Finally, he said, do you want to tell me something? Nimi lifted her head up, looked right into Paul's eyes, and said, I don't want you to go. And then she was back to crying. Nimi, I know. I understand you don't. I have a little secret to share with you, and it might not help an awful lot, but maybe a little. You want to hear it? She nodded her head. I don't want to go either. Nimi sat right up. She wiped her nose a little bit with her sleeve. She said, good. So then why don't you stay? Remember we talked the other night about how I want to get back to work to help the people I work with? Nimi nodded her head, and then she said, are they more important than us? Do you like them more than us? And he goes, oh boy, it's getting harder, not easier. No, sweetheart, they are not more important than you are. Absolutely not. And I don't like them more than I like you. But that doesn't mean I can leave them. I have a job, sort of like you. You have a job also. I do? Yeah, you go to school during the year, but I know you love being with your Ema at home. But, you know, I'm not going to read the rest of it, basically. They talk. And finally, she goes downstairs with him to finish dinner. I put that in to read to you because I wanted you to just get a picture of the connection that there is, as much as there's a tremendous connection. At one point, briefly, I'll tell you that when his best friend goes up to see him, his best friend says, Paul, I've known you since 4th grade. And if I know anybody, you're like a brother to me. When the Diamonds, the name of the group was the Diamonds, even though her name is Diamond. The name of this band was the Diamonds. When the Diamonds were breaking up, you didn't have to tell me. I knew that you were breaking up. And I know that something's going on. This is right in the middle of this theater. He says, I know that something's going on and you're not saying anything. And it's up to you. You don't have to tell me. But if you want to, I'm here. And I know you don't have too many people in the world that you can really talk to. Meaning that it won't get into the newspaper the next day. So he looks at it and he says, Stuart, all I can tell you is every single day I'm falling deeper and deeper in love with that woman. It's her smile, it's the way she laughs when we talk. It's like sitting talking with her is the most perfect thing in the world for me. And I'm leaving here in 3 weeks. And if she doesn't feel the same way, I'm never going to see her again. I'm never going to see those kids that I'm in love with again. I don't know what to do. It's not so simple. He says, well, if you want simple, take your club hit her over the head with your club, grab her by the hair, and drag her through the street to your cave. That's the caveman style. He says, yeah, I can see that working real well here. So you understand now. Remember, Rena has trouble finding somebody that would be interested in coming to a house who's 47 years old, and there's 6-year-old kids there. They're going to be in that house for the next 12 years. Those kids are in first grade. And she figures that the odds of you finding someone aren't very good. And Paul's got about 40 million women that would love to marry him. Of course, they would love to marry the most famous man in the world. They would love to marry somebody with $1 billion in the bank. How do you know that it's me that you're interested in? Well, he knows that with Rena, because Rena thinks his name is Rob Martin, accountant in London. She doesn't know the first thing about who he is. So if she's really in love with him, and he doesn't know for sure if she is, but if she is, it's him that she's in love with. So that's what you're all bumping up against. And
let's do 1 or 2 questions if people have a question or a comment, and then we'll sign some books and enjoy some dessert. Anybody have any questions? Alex.
I used to read a lot of Faye Kellerman. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She writes suspense novels. I think her character is also Rena, but it's a modern Orthodox element. Was that important for you as a new writer to introduce modern orthodoxy to the general public in your fiction?
no. And I worried that, and I kind of worried that it might leave other people, not so interested, but no, the story only works. The tension here is that, okay, I didn't mention this. She went to the matchmaker, and the matchmaker says, you're 37 years old. You have to understand, the 37, 38-year-old guys are looking for the 28-year-old Barbie dolls, the skinny Barbie dolls. They're not looking for 37-year-old women. So she says, so what am I looking at? Well, the guys who are 47, 48, 50 years old. And she said that she was telling this to Paul. She said, they come in, they see that there's 2 6-year-old kids in first grade. Says, I always laugh at my cousin about the guy on the date with him. He wanted to know how soon I could give up my job and we could move to West Palm Beach and retire. I'm not retiring. I've got 2 first graders, 6 years old. Well, they're not interested in coming to a house with 2 6-year-olds. So from her standpoint, you see, all that kind of builds the problem. That's what's the tension is, that for her, finding someone is very difficult. For him, finding something. You can find 20 million women who would be happy to marry him, but show him the woman who's seriously in love with him. It's not easy. How many times has he thought, he mentions sometime in the book, how many times I thought this was really a woman who was crazy about me, and then I kind of find out that she's already counting the money, So it's not easy finding somebody. They're both, for different reasons, stretched, and the clock is ticking. She's 37, he's 38. She's got a beautiful family, and that's true. But she's facing the likelihood that she's going to be alone the rest of her life. So, the only way, and I was uncomfortable because I read that book about 25 years ago, and I knew that the lady's name in his book was Rena. But what I did was, we had about 20 names that we thought of for the girl when you were home, and we put all the names up, and everybody got to vote. Okay, what should the name be? And finally, we ended up with a name that we thought was easy for people who were Jewish to connect to the name Rena. It's an easy name, it's an easy word, and also I used it. That's because Rena in Hebrew means song or happy. So what happened is, he asks her when he first meets her, the very first time he's there, your kids have all these interesting Hebrew names. Do they mean anything? She says, yeah, sure. is Rena? What does that mean? Well, it means song or happiness. He says, well, how'd you get that name? He says, well, my father. My father loved to play the piano, and we used to sing together all the time. And when I was born, he said to my mother, you know how happy this little one is going to make me. And you know how I love to sing. So can we name her Rena for song and for happiness? And she said, yeah. So that's how I got the name Rena. So he says, so you still sing with your father? And that's what she tells him. No, he was killed when I was 12 years old. And he begins to understand all the things that go into people that, one of the things is the things, you look at people and they all look happy and wonderful and everything's fine. And you don't really know what's there. Sometimes there's incredible pain and difficulty. And some people just have to deal with it, and some people don't deal with it. So, I don't know if I answered your question, but,
Not really about the orthodoxy part. Was it important for you to introduce to the general public an orthodox character that often isn't used in fiction?
I'll say as much as I can with, I would be careful with what I say, but yeah, I wanted, part of what I was writing here was for my two daughters, because they sometimes read books that I was crazy about, every now and then, and but it's okay, because they're first cousins, whose parents are real Haredi, black hat, they were reading the same books, So I was looking for something that they would be interested in, and that they could see, oh, there's a character that I can really admire, strong, incontrollable, and that lady, if you kidded her, she'd kid you right back just like that. And there were times, when in the context of discussion back and forth, he would say something like he would pretend that he didn't like or he liked her potato cookle, and his first time he's ever eaten potato cookle in his life, and he thinks it's wonderful, and he says, "Oh, this is really delicious. I guess you bought this in the store." And she says, "No, I made it about 3.5 years ago. It's been in the freezer." And he thinks to himself, I just can't beat this girl. Every time I think I've got it, she nails me, and he loves that. He loves playing wit to wits, and so, yeah.
Is there another question? Donnie?
Can you just explain the picture on the front cover?
The picture on the front cover was taken by my wife, and it's a picture of the lake where I grew up from the time I was born, going there every summer. And actually, as it turns out, there's, in the story, the very first day after Friday night, the first Friday night he's there, he realizes that Kobe can't go running around with his buddies, can't play soccer for at least a week and a half, doctor said. And so he says, how about if I take you sailing? On Sunday, I'll take you sailing, I'll teach you how to sail. And he says, that'd be great, And so this is my sailboat. And the gal who did the cover, she was about to take the sailboat off. She said, wait a minute, is that your sailboat? I said, as it turns out, yes, it is. She said, oh, leave it there then. leave it. It's your boat, leave it there. So that's what it is. It's just a view of the lake that I grew up in, and this is the name of that lake is Chapman Lake, but in the book, it's Angel's Lake. Well, I got a lot of people who said, this is a book that really should be into a movie. So I said, I don't know. I said, you've only read the first book, you don't know where the other 4 are going to take you. The other 3 are going to take you. Okay, so
thank you all for joining. Thank you. The book is for sale.